Hey guys. Well, since the last video I haven't gotten a whole lot done, but I did achieve on finishing the overall goal for the weekend, which was getting the wings mounted to the fuselage, which involved, for the most part, figuring out how I was going to attach them and then going ahead and doing so. What I ended up doing, and from up here it's probably impossible to see, so let's go down here. You can see just to the bottom left of the pin, the anti-rotating pin on the wing, there's a hole there, and up here just in front of where the main spar slides in, there's another hole there. On the insides of the, just on the inside of the wing, I put two blind nuts, and I'm going to be screwing the wing in from the bottom. And you may be wondering, how am I going to get to those screws? Let me reposition here. So when the bottom is sheeted, you can kind of see the angles on how it's going to be sheeted. So what I'm going to end up doing is, like for this side here, where the sheeting wraps around, I'm just going to not put a little elongated hole in the bottom of the sheeting, just big enough to get my screwdriver through and go in at the right angle and put the screws in. And the same with the front two. I can get to the screws from the inside of the fuselage as far as putting them in, but I won't really be able to easily screw them in through the inside. So just on the bottom I'll have 1, 2, 3, 4 small holes, just to slide the screwdriver in. So didn't turn out too bad. Also, I did sheet the bottom of the wings. That's all done. Kind of a fiasco. The downside to really light contest grade balsa is it's very soft and rather brittle. And I have put more holes in these wings just carrying them around and test fitting them to the fuselage. I mean, holy crap, I put a lot of holes in there. Oh, let me get off the floor here. And you can see evidence to that through the top of this wing. There didn't used to be a lot of filler up here, but like I said, it's so soft. You can kind of see right here where just barely touching it is really flexing it, and I've broken it right here so many times. I've actually gone underneath on the inside and kind of saturated the wood with some thin CA just to give it some extra strength. Once it's covered, believe it or not, the covering adds a ton of strength, so it'd be a lot more difficult to puncture the sheeting once it's covered. So for right now, I kind of have to treat it like an eggshell. Be very careful with it. So yeah, everything lines up good. I mean, the way it meets the center rib here for the center section, everything lines up perfect. No complaints. The only issue I had is figuring out what I'm going to do for the ailerons. I'm not putting flaps on this airplane. I've flown enough of these things to know they really don't need it. But if it does have an issue slowing down, I can just mix in some flaperons. But the way everything is on the plans is the way it would be on the traditional DHC-1 Chipmunk, which is a very large flap and a smaller aileron. But since I'm clipping the wing to make it a Super Chipmunk, that makes that aileron even smaller. So that's not going to work. So my initial thought was build the flap and build the aileron, cut the flap right here, and permanently secure this portion of the flap to the wing and just sheet it. And then modify this portion of the flap, build it into the aileron, and so forth. But that was not working like I thought. You can see here, last night I started framing up one of the flaps, and it's just going to be a ton of work to modify these, especially modify a portion of this one into an aileron. It would just require so much sanding, and just for a long span like that, trying to sand it nice and straight, it's just a ton of work. So I decided I'm just going to bite the bullet and do it myself. So, on the trailing edge, I just finished this morning. The flap normally would have started about right here and would have come out to about this rib right here. So now this is going to be just one big full span aileron, and this is a permanent piece. But making this was a little bit of a chore because I did it completely from scratch. So there is 1, 2, 3 extra ribs that I had to make before I could put this top and bottom sheeting on there. And each of these ribs is a different size. It's a different length. It's a different thickness. And also, it's more of a flat bottom, semi-symmetrical airfoil. So the bottom is flat, but the top comes down. So I had to make this. The front of the rib had to be faced just right. So it was a lot of measuring. It wasn't difficult, but it was rather time-consuming. And I'll show you how I did that, just for those that are wondering. I got the TV going on back here that everybody hates. That's funny. So you can kind of see I drew out one of these ribs right here. So the way I achieved this is this rib is glued onto the wing permanently, then the flap starts. So what I did is I moved over to this rib right here and just started making measurements. Going from the trailing edge of the wing out to the tip, made that measurement, which is this line right here. I guess first of all, I used the wing itself and used the back of the trailing edge, compensating for the sheeting on top and bottom. So the end of this rib that I made is actually just slightly shorter than the back of the wing because the sheeting is going to be going over top. So I have this line here, which indicates the thickness of the trailing edge, and then obviously did my overall length going from the center line, then went to each side here. Now because this is angled, here's some of the ribs that I'm not using. You can see that when you look at it dead on, the face has a slight angle to it. So by just doing some measuring, I concluded that the bottom side from this point to this point is exactly 1/16 shorter than this one. So once I made this rib outline, I just made another notch at 1/16 shorter, just like that, and that gives me my perfect angle. So after I made one piece and figured out that it's going to work and work just fine, as I went on to the other ribs, I just took my measurements, drew it right on the balsa, and then cut them out. Then once they were on there, sheet the top and bottom. And it's going to be kind of the same principle for the ailerons, except it's going to be a lot of work, because now I need to make a new leading edge for the aileron, which also is tapered, because as it gets to the wingtip it gets thinner, and I have to compensate for the fact that they're sheeting on top and bottom. So it's actually going to be just slightly narrower than the actual trailing edge of the wing, which is already finished. So it's going to be quite a bit of work. I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 ribs times 2, so 20 ribs that I'm going to have to do that same method of figuring out the correct size. So I'm going to have a lot of work cut out, but it's going to be the way I want it. So hopefully at the end it'll be worth it and it'll turn out nice, because like I said, trying to make these work, I mean, even the way I was looking at it, it would have required a lot of sanding to make this work if I was going to have this actually be the flap itself. Because the two pieces right here for the trailing edge that are sheeted, after the sheeting was put on, it was still a narrower profile than this rib here. So by the time you put the flap on and then you cap the flaps would actually be a total of about 1/4 of an inch thicker. So this would have required a ton of sanding to make these work anyway. So that kind of made it an easier choice to just go ahead and make my own. So I've kind of got it figured out how I'm going to do it. Not looking forward to it because it's a ton of work. But, you know, got to make it right. Got to make it the way I want it. And I'm kind of going by the Goldberg Chipmunk. As you can see here, this one does have flaps, just because before I restored the airplane, it already had flaps on it. Where normally it just would have had one big one big full span aileron. But as you can see, the Super Chipmunk does have a larger aileron than it does the flaps. Where in this case, if I would keep it the way it is built per the plans, after clipping the wing, I would have these little dinky ailerons and these giant flaps. And I just don't want that. So kind of coming up in here, you can kind of see down in there where the screws are going to go. And like I said, I can get my hands down in there to get the screws put in, both front and back. And then just go underneath with my screwdriver and slide it in at an angle through my little notch and tighten the wings. So that should work out pretty well. Everything lines up perfect. And believe it or not, I got a complaint on my last video about using that word too much. But hey, when it's perfect, it's perfect. I mean, everything is just absolutely straight. Nothing has been measured. I mean, I haven't had to, do the old tape measure or string trick going from wingtip to elevator tip, to make sure everything is lined up straight, because the way it's built, it can only go together straight unless you really screw something up. So that worked out quite well. I do have a question though. So this does have wire landing gear. It's 1/4 inch wire, so pretty thick stuff that I gotta bend myself. I'm probably gonna purchase a wire bender from Eastwood, which is pretty much the same thing that K&S sells. Has anybody tried one of those? And the reason I ask is I've never been really good at bending really thick wire, because I know there's ways you're supposed to anneal it, get it nice and hot, make your bends, then heat it up again and cool it properly. But it's very difficult to do, because if you don't get the temperatures just right, the wire will either be really soft or it'll be brittle and it'll break. So the majority of people say do not heat it, just find a good way to bend it. So I'm probably going to buy that bender from Eastwood. If anybody has used one, let me know how they work. And they're only $40, so I'm not too concerned about it. But I've really been not looking forward to making that gear just for that specific reason. So next, I'm waiting on some glue, so I'm probably not going to do anything else with it for the weekend. I mean, the weekend's almost over anyway. It's Sunday afternoon. And I've achieved exactly what I wanted to achieve. So I'm pretty happy. So I'm probably gonna have to order some wood to do my ailerons, and I'm still trying to figure out exactly how I'm gonna do it so it turns out good and looks nice. So I'm still trying to figure out my methods for doing so. So I might hold off on the ailerons for now and get some more work done on the fuselage. So I'm to the point now where I can glue these tubes in place. Let me get this out of here. My P-51 has been graciously holding Chipmunk parts for me. So to sheet this, I'm going to glue these tubes in. I'm just going to use CA just to glue them in. The arrow shafts are sanded, so they're nice and rough, so glue will take to them just fine. And I'll glue these in while the stabs are on, because these center ribs can move. But once the stab is on, everything is straight, everything is tight. So when I glue these all together, I can pull the stabs off and these outer ribs are going to be nice and rigid. And then I can sand this whole section top and bottom. Then it'll be ready to blend into the sheeting on the fuselage once I sheet that. But once this is sheeted, then the fun part begins. I got to figure out where I'm going to place all my push rods on the inside. I still have to figure out what I'm going to do for a tail wheel. I'm pretty sure I have one that'll probably work, so I'll just make that work. So that's going to be some pretty time-consuming work. The majority of the building on this airplane is done. I mean, the plane is built. There's just some sheeting left. Obviously, I need to scratch build and design my own ailerons. But for the most part, the plane is built. And now it's the very time-consuming and tedious stuff, which we all love so much. I can't remember if I've shown it without the hatch yet or not. Without the hatch on there, you got so much room for your fuel tank, plenty of room and options where to put your servos, batteries, all that good stuff. There's just a ton of room in here, so that's not going to be an issue at all. What I'm really not looking forward to is these wing fillets right here, because the Chipmunk has a very distinct look with the way the fillet curves into the fuselage and goes around in a nice curve right there. Oh, excuse me. So once again, there's nothing on the plans. There's no templates. There's nothing. So this is all me. I got to figure out how to do it. So I haven't figured out exactly how I'm going to make the fillet yet. But when I'm done, what I have decided I'm going to do is the fillet comes up flush with this rib right here. So when the wing detaches, right where the wing connects to the fuselage, that's where the fillet begins and blends into the fuselage. So regardless how I do it, I'm going to fiberglass this area, and I'm going to paint it. But I'm going to fiberglass it, get it nice and smooth with a couple coats of resin, kind of blend it into the fuselage a little bit, and then I'm going to cover the airplane, or at least the fuselage at this point. So it'll all be covered, and I'll cut the covering right around, so it overlaps onto the fillet just a little bit. But then I'll mask around this entire area, and I'm going to paint that white. So what that's going to do is it's going to simulate an actual fairing that is removable. It'll look like a separate piece that's put on the airplane, which is the way it's supposed to be. Because on the full scale, I've never seen a full-scale Chipmunk torn apart, but I'm assuming there's several mounting locations where the wing attaches to the fuselage. So to take the wings off, you remove those fairings. So it'll look like they can be taken off, and that's kind of what I'm shooting for. And I don't have to cover them, because covering that, oh my god, what a nightmare that would be. So, and having, crap on the workbench, you make little dings and dents in the wood, and it's always something. But like I said, it's turning out pretty good. I'm happy with it. Had a few frustrating moments, but nothing I can't handle. It's just another airplane. So kind of a shorter video today. Like I said, not too much more progress has been done. Now we're getting into kind of the time-consuming stuff. So depending on what I get done this next week, which may be a little, maybe a lot, maybe nothing, it might be a couple weeks before I put up another video. But just want to keep you in the loop, show you where I'm at. All right, later.